So you can see the superior lobe, the middle lobe, and then the inferior lobe. And it's much bigger in the back. Right from the front, it looks like, wow, that's just tiny, but really it gets much bigger in the back. So this is the middle lobe, and then this is the superior lobe. On the right side, we only have two lobes, a superior lobe and an inferior lobe. And that's because the heart kind of sits more on the left side. So here you can see it takes up a lot of that space. And that's also why we have this indent in the left lobe called the cardiac notch. Okay, so the heart's tilted that way, and this blood vessel coming out of the right atrium, the pulmonary trunk, splits into the left and right pulmonary arteries and goes into the lungs. So here's the arteries going in. You can see it better over here, the blue. And then they pick up oxygen, drop off the carbon dioxide, so now it's oxygenated blood, so it comes back through the pulmonary veins, and then it goes back to the right atrium of the heart. But here's the arteries, pulmonary veins, and the bronchi. So there's a lot of tubes in the lungs. That's why the lungs are so incredibly light. They look like they're real solid, but they're really not. They're just a bajillion little tubes. And then at the very end of all of these, you have the alveoli, which are just little bitty balloons. So it's all pretty much about air. So they're pretty large, but they're not like terribly solid.
An alveolar sac?
Oh no, alveolar sacs are microscopic. This would be like a lobule. It's not a lobe, but it'd be a tiny, we don't worry about that, but it'd be like a lobule. So the top part here is the apex, because that's the point. That's where these come to a point. And then the bottom is really broad and flat-ish. And so this is called the base. And that sits directly on the diaphragm. So when the diaphragm moves and goes down, it's going to pull these because the serous membrane has a negative pressure between the two layers, between the parietal layer and the visceral layer. And so when the parietal layer moves, which is attached to the ribs and the diaphragm, the visceral layer is pulled along with it. So it's like taking a sponge and forcing it to be bigger. And when you do that, you increase this space, which increasing the space decreases the pressure because they're opposites. And wherever the pressure is lower, that's where everything wants to go. So blood is going to rush up through that inferior vena cava, and air is going to rush in. Even lymph is going to rush up into the thoracic cavity. Everything wants to go into that thoracic cavity if the pressure is less. And that's why you breathe in. And then your diaphragm stops, or your muscles stop contracting. The diaphragm relaxes and domes back up, which decreases the space. As soon as you decrease the space, you increase the pressure, and the air rushes out because nobody wants to be where the pressure is really high. Okay? So we've got the hyoid bone. This is the hyothyroid membrane, which you probably don't have to know. But again, the membranes just usually tell you what two things are connected. This is the thyroid cartilage, Adam's apple. This is the cricoid cartilage, so this would be the cricothyroid membrane. This, by the way, is the membrane that you would cut if you had to give somebody a tracheotomy out in the middle of a Walmart or something. Right? I could do it. I saw MacGyver do it enough times. I could do it.
I would trust you.
Okay. It's not a good move. This is the trachea down here. So from here down to there, this is the trachea. This is the thyroid gland. So this is the thyroid cartilage, and this is that thyroid gland that you were talking about. Okay, we'll talk about this a lot more because it controls your metabolism when we talk about the endocrine system. Now, this is not your thymus. This is thyroid. Your thymus is down here behind your sternum, right? You thump your thymus. You don't want to thump your thyroid. That'd be a bad idea. So these are the trachea C-rings. And then this V-shaped area, that's the carina. And this is the left primary bronchi, right primary bronchi, left secondary bronchi, and you'll notice there's only two because there's two lobes, also called the lobar bronchi. On the right side, there would be 3. 1, 2, and 3. 1 going to the superior lobe, 1 going to the intermediate or middle lobe, and 1 going to the inferior lobe. That's all I can think of.